Hola, boa noite. Carl Munson here with the Portugal Show live on Facebook and on YouTube more recently. Thank you for being here to those of you who've already joined us. And it's my pleasure to be in the company of Phil Sylvain again. Phippe, his nom de plume, as we do a bit of CSI into Portuguese history. If you were here last time that Phil and I were together, we debunked, or he debunked, made fake news of the Martim Moniz legend. We haven't had any pushback or scandal as yet challenging Portuguese history in such a barefaced way. But let's see what happens tonight as we look at the Battle of Ourique. So let's bring Philip from the green room, or from his living room actually, onto the screen now and say good evening. Good night to you, Phil.
Hi.
How you doing? Are you well? Excellent news. Excellent news.
And you are doing fine.
I'm doing very well as well. Yeah, I look forward to our evenings together when it's almost like a fireside chat, and I learn a little bit more about Portuguese history with your unique twist. Before we have a quick look at the weather, which we like to do just to let everybody know what life is like in Portugal, could you set the scene with a brief introduction to how you got to be the CSI Portuguese history guy? How did this originate, and where should people go to find out more?
Well, I've been writing about Portuguese history now for a couple years, and I've written some children's books. I've also written some books for adults in some ways, but actually for 12-year-olds, but the adults seem to like them. I publish the story chapter at a time every week on about 40 groups, Facebook groups. Expat groups and Portuguese language groups and just people from all over the place. And they've been well received, the chapters. I'm thinking, wow, I'm going to write another book like this one. In the meantime, though, I've been doing these shorter books for children that are between ages 5 to about, say, 10 or 11 years old. So something that grandma and grandpa can read to the child if they're younger, like 4 and 5 years old. I have a 5-year-old grandchild, and for older kids to read them themselves. And I've written 3 stories in English and in Portuguese. I don't do the Portuguese. I have a person who helps me through it, Andrea. Andrea is very good, and she actually knows quite a bit of history too. So she's just the ideal kind of person to help me do the translation. The strange idioms in Portuguese and in English, and trying to, oh, you don't say that in Portuguese, and it's the same thing. Oh, we don't say that in English. Yeah. Anyway, these stories are on Amazon. So I have 3 stories, and one of them is this story, which is the Battle of Ourique.
Fantastic. And we'll delve into that this evening in a nice sort of leisurely way, as we've done for the past 2 stories, Queen Ourique and Martim Moniz, as I mentioned before. And we've had a lot of fun doing that. And we will be interspersed with questions about Portugal, which, as you may have noticed, Phippe, Phil there is from North America, Canadian, been here for a while now in Portugal, so has a unique perspective.
Yeah.
Sorry, Phil.
I've been here 7 years.
7 years. Well, that's a season of man, isn't it? 7 years, an age of man. I think a good span to have been here. So, any questions that you would like an answer from a Canadian who's been in Portugal for a while? He's your man, and he's here tonight for the next hour, telling the story, but also available to you. So before we get into the story, let's have a quick look at the weather in Portugal as it's been today, so you know what it's going to be like when you finally get here, folks. Let me just share this on the screen with you. I don't know if we should talk about the pandemic and what's going on with that as well briefly, Phil, and your view on that. But certainly weather-wise, Lisbon has been 61 degrees Fahrenheit well, currently is 61. The high has been 68, and it's been a rainy old night. You wouldn't be eating a nice petiscos and drinking a copo de vinho out on the piazza tonight, or the Praça, I should say. You'll probably be inside a restaurant if you were in Lisbon this evening. Porto, double that and add 30. What's that? 56 in Porto currently, and a clear night sky. It has been raining there all day, with a 66 high there in Porto. Coimbra, a little cooler still, 12 degrees and a clear evening. And that's nice and easy. 70 degrees was the high there, but a rainy day in Coimbra. But sunshine, cloudy day, but sunshiny in the south in Faro. 52, 82 down there in Faro. And currently 64 Fahrenheit in Faro at the moment, just to let you know what you'd be letting yourselves in for if you were here in Portugal tonight. A few kind folks saying good evening to us. Vara was first in tonight and tuning in on YouTube, which is great. I mean, quite a few people seem to be joining us via YouTube tonight, which is wonderful. Hi, Carl and Phippe. Greetings from the cooler UK. Good to join the expats yet again. Great to have your company, Vara. And North Carolina, Eric J's there. Thank you very much, Eric, for your support. Really appreciate it. La bonne nuit from Eric J in North Carolina. Charles, our friend from the Expat Man Cave. Charles is here. Hola, Colin, Phippe. Love the history lesson Phippe provides. So there'll be that tonight for you, Charles. And this is great. I'm in the Covilhã Fundão region, and it's so hard to find the history of the region on the internet. Keep up the good work, guys. Isn't that lovely to hear from Sam Dave on YouTube as well there, Phippe?
I like that.
2 thumbs up. And 2 more from me as well. So yeah, thank you for your feedback and sort of piping up and chipping in, shouting out, as we say in the UK. So yes, lovely to have your comments and keep them coming throughout the show. Anything you want us, or I keep using the royal we, like it's me that's sharing this information. It's Phippe who's behind what you're going to hear tonight, and I have some sort of vicarious glory by hanging out with him when he does this. Lauren is here. Hi, you're a regular. I can call you a regular now, Lauren, and Andrew perhaps as well from Raleigh, Benoit from Raleigh in North Carolina.
North Carolina, wow.
Yeah, do you know North Carolina?
Not really.
You sounded like you did then, the way you said that. Oh, Raleigh, North Carolina. Do you know it, Phil? No.
No. The company that I worked for had an office in Raleigh, and I used to deal with the people from the Raleigh office. But mostly
often the way, isn't it, in North America, people do know other people and the place on the other end of the phone, because of the way things work there. Yeah, interesting. So this story tonight, the Battle of Ourique, is this going to be a bombshell, or should we not even say that at this point? Sorry for the military analogy as well.
I'm going to present something a little bit different.
Okay.
I have a hypothesis about what I think happened at the Battle of Ourique.
Okay.
I mean, this is something, look at the date on that. So this took place in 1139. So this is like over 800 years ago. And there isn't a lot of writing from that period. So you have to kind of read between the lines to figure out, well, what really happened? So I'm presenting 3 versions of the Battle of Ourique. The hagiographic version, which was the official version for about 500 years. The conventional historical version, and I recently read the history of the Battle of Ourique that was written in 2018, so very recent. And then the gold heist version, which is my theory of what I think actually did happen.
Which we hope will be on Netflix one day.
Yep.
It's fingers crossed. We're going to be rich when Netflix sign us up, Phil. Do you see how I cut myself into that? But I've got to take you back. What does hagiographic mean? I can't let you just slip that past me.
Okay. I'm going to define it in about 2 slides.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. I should have waited. Okay. So we where do we go from here? I'm the links I'm looking at. Oh, yeah, on the left here. So do you
Yeah.
want me to go on to onto this one now?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. There we go. And this will explain my question. Excellent.
Well, it won't completely.
Okay.
The hagiographic version of the Battle of Ourique. So it goes along the lines of facing the Muslim infidels. The Portuguese were greatly outnumbered in that critical situation. Our Lord came to help the Catholics and commanded that, and it's interesting that they use Dom Alfonso, not Dom Alfonso. So Dom, D-O-M, is what Portuguese use, but Dom is what the Spanish use. And that means that this writing occurred sometime around when Portugal was ruled by the Spanish. So, that was in the early 1500s. Should become the first king of that people. So there is a long sound tradition in Portugal of the appearance of Christ our Savior to King Dom Alfonso, a fact that is confirmed by the writings of our own Portuguese authors as well as many from other countries, thus authenticating the favor that God, our Lord, wanted to give to the Portuguese nation. So this is all very religious. It's all saying that God was on our side and God's going to help us. Next slide.
Okay. Continued, I see.
So a little bit about the document. It is an authentic document in which King Alfonso himself swears on the Holy Gospel how he saw with his own eyes, the Savior of the world in his great beauty. This document was found in the year 1506, and that's important because it's not a coincidence that it's 1506. Something happened in 1506.
Okay.
In the archives of the monastery of Alcabasa by a Dr. Fray Bernard of Brito. And I looked up Dr. Fray Bernard, and he wasn't in the monastery. He wasn't even born in 1506. So already there's a little bit of a problem with this, which is pretty typical of hagiographic versions of things. So in the legend, Alfonso Ourique was visited before the battle by an old man who saw in a dream that he would be victorious because God would intervene in his favor. So he advised the nobleman to leave the encampment alone when he heard the bell of the local chapel. Anyways, he goes off and he sees Jesus Christ on the cross, and he sees some angels, and all this stuff. This was the official story in the 1500s. Next slide.
Oh, wow. Okay. Sorry, I've lagged behind there. I've already been hooked by the storytelling, and I've forgotten about the production. So here we go. Sorry.
Okay, so now we're going to talk about what hagiographic means. So there's two halves of hagiographic that refer to holiness and writing. So it's holy writing. And originally these were just biographies of saints. But after that, probably towards the 1600s, they start to become stories of people and heroes. So in this case, Alfonso Ourique is a hero, and they make the subject seem like a hero, or at least wonderful and nearly perfect person, and that's true. So this is all the narrative that's created. But fortunately, we have archaeologists. and archaeologists give us information that is not a lie. The art of the historian is to know how to read between the lines and what is not said, because what is said is always, or almost always, a lie. And this hagiographic version of the story is an example of it's full of lies.
Wow.
So
Okay.
it was in 1419 that the legend first appeared in the Crónica de Portugal. So again, an official document, the Chronicle of Portugal. And it was analyzed by Alexandre Herculano. Now, Alexander Herculano is the name that, you see on the streets in almost every Portuguese city. I know it's in Caldas da Rainha. There's a Herculano, Alexandro Herculano Street. And he was a very good historian, and he didn't accept this stuff. So he judged it a pious fraud in his investigation in the middle of the 19th century. So
I'm hooked. I'm hooked already, Phil.
So hagiographic accounts, and there are lots of hagiographic accounts in history, and you have to comb through what you're reading and be able to sort what is true and what is just religious exaggeration and figments of people's imagination. So Portuguese history, unfortunately, is full of this stuff. And this is an example of it. So,
but I suppose any country that has a rich religious history, which is most in some way, will be like this, won't it? Though those are the record keepers, are they not? The historians would have been the monks, and that would have been infused with religious fervor and enthusiasm.
And that's why the archaeologists say this is all bullshit, because the only people who could write were the religious people, the monks. So of course they're going to infuse it with all this stuff. So the bottom line is hagiographic descriptions are not to be believed.
Wow. So okay, and that's what that means, is it? Hagiographic means versions that come from religious sources. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, this is so interesting. Just as a side note here, in terms of how history is told by the victors and so on, or the powerful, right? And we're no exception to that, are we? In the way that the world narrative is being created, it's being made by the powerful and their allies currently. And I'm really enjoying this idea that history is both a science and an art. And I suppose the art of history might be where you bring in some artistic and creative license, the hagiographic, and the science of history is the forensic and the archaeological, where, as you say there, lies aren't told, but sort of accurate theories are developed instead of the more romanticized versions of things.
Yeah.
Amazing. And also something else, it is connected in some way. I was looking at an exposition on the value of wearing a mask in the pandemic, and the person said, this is why you should wear a mask, and it was this is why you should do it, this is why you should do it, this is why you should do it, and therefore that's why you should do it. And I was thinking to myself, okay, I mean, setting aside whether it's right or not, that sounds to me like almost like a hagiographic defense. This is what I think, and I'm just going to tell you 10 things that justify my beliefs now. And obviously the other person will say, well, I don't believe in wearing a mask, and these are my 10 reasons. And both of them are being quite hagiographical, I suppose you could say, because they're not taking an all-round picture, are they? They're just saying, this is what I think, and this is how I'm justifying it.
I always like these things with them quoting some science.
Yes.
Yeah. The ultimate decider for me is science. Now, science can be confusing, and there's lots of things unanswered by science. And, I say archaeologists, yes, they know the truth, but boy, you still got to interpret it.
Yes. And they don't all agree with each other, do they?
Yeah, they don't.
Okay. Oh, wow. Well, thank you for indulging me in that little side note there. But I think it kind of furnishes the bigger picture, because we're no different in many ways, are we? Although that said, I also really liked your positioning of this, what did you say, 800 years ago? And in the 1100s, the 12th century, we always view history through our own lens, don't we? And it's hard for us not to do that. But 800 years ago, people would have had quite a different idea of the Messiah, the Savior, the Lord Jesus Christ, because we've developed quite a lot of different ideas in the last 800 years, haven't we? That have entirely changed how people would have even seen a miracle. You talked about how the hagiographic version there speaks of a miracle, and we would think of that now in probably quite a secular, atheistic way about how religious people see miracles, perhaps. But then, I mean, that was fully the currency, wasn't it? You kind of had miracles on your side, or you didn't.
Yeah, yeah. People believed religion fervently and literally, and they followed what the priests said, what the monks said, what the bishop said, without questioning.
Yeah.
I've got a story here. Like, the date 1506 is an interesting date that the author of that document chose, and it explains some things. So 1506 was the Easter slaughter in Lisbon. And it's when a crowd of Catholics persecuted, tortured, killed, and burnt at the stake more than 1,900 people who were accused of being Jews, and thus guilty of deicide and heresy. And if this occurred actually in Rossio, and if you go to Rossio, in a street between Rossio and Martin Manège is a large, it's not a plaque, it's actually a stone with a big metal plaque on it, telling people about this. And so Catholics were praying. So how this started, Catholics were praying for the end of the drought and plague, when someone swore they had seen the face of Jesus on the altar. So the plague first started in Europe in 1348. And that was actually in Lisbon was the first plague in 1348. But it kept on coming back for the next few hundred years. So, in 1506, there's a plague in Lisbon, and actually it's so bad that the king at the time, who was Manuel I, left Lisbon and went to a small town to find a better air and less people, and to avoid getting the plague. And the plague is so insidious because kings and queens had died of the plague. Philippa, the queen of Juan I, died of the plague, and her son, several years later, Duarte, also died of the plague. So, kings and queens were not immune from getting the plague, and therefore nobody was immune from getting the plague, because the kings and the queens were treated the best of anybody. So So people were afraid of the plague, and there had been a drought too, which often plague results because there's the drought, and everybody's malnourished, and therefore they are more susceptible to getting the plague.
Wow.
So this person says, "Oh, I see Jesus, we're saved." And that explained why the Catholics present as a message from them, they said, "Oh, it's a miracle. It's a message from the Messiah." But a new Christian was a Jew who had been forced to convert to Christianity. And I know about this because my father-in-law actually was descendant from new Christians. So a new Christian disagreed and voiced his opinion that it had been the reflection of the candle in the crucifix. Hearing this, some parishioners grabbed the man, brought him outside the church, where he was beaten to death by the crowd, and his body was burnt in Rossio. That's why that monument is in Rossio.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So it was the first person. And then this went on, until they had killed 1,900 people. The king had to rush back from where he was and get some order put in. And some people ended up being executed for being part of this.
What, the perpetrating side?
Yeah.
This is incredible. This is incredible, isn't it? I mean, because this new Christian would have said this in good faith, literally.
Yeah.
And it's just not what people wanted to hear. This would have been received as the fake news of the time, inciting all manner of emotion. I mean, presumably there was something bubbling under, some pre-existing condition, which this was the lighting the touch paper of presumably some resentment and horrific relationships between people, and then this resulting in this Easter slaughter, which I didn't know about. I mean, it's unimaginable, isn't it? Or maybe not, in the crazy times we're living in. But it's just grisly and ghastly. And you would not know, would you, as you wander about Rossio in the modern age, and drug dealers come up to you and offer you hashish, and there are street entertainers and wonderful parts of Portuguese history all around, or modern history all around the shops and culture of Rossio. I had no idea that this was part of the backstory there as I've walked those streets, Phil.
Yeah. Well, next time you're in Rossio, look for this monument.
Yes, I will.
Now, why I think this is interesting too is that, well, again, this is a case where, I saw an image, it's Jesus, it's a miracle, the Messiah's coming. Well, the story in the hagiography of the Battle of Ourique is the same thing. It's Afonso Ourique saying, I saw Jesus, I saw the angels, I saw the Messiah. So I think that this date appears there because they're saying, well, this is a great guy, Afonso Ourique. He's our hero. He sees these things. So therefore, it wasn't wrong that person was seeing these things, and that the Jew was wrong. So that's why I think that date appears there.
Okay.
In this hagiography.
Okay. Understood. Yeah, because you circled that in the previous slide, didn't you? 1506.
Yeah.
Okay. If I could just go to a couple of comments before we move on, because we are going to go next, aren't we, to the conventional version? I think after those two accounts.
Yeah.
Stephen Green, hello, Carl. My wife and I are planning to visit in June next year, COVID permitting. Yeah, fingers crossed for that. Heavens. Yeah. And if all goes well, we'll come back to home. I retire, and I'll come back when I retire, and we move to Portugal. Yes, good luck with that, Stephen. Yeah, all the best to you with those plans. Because I don't know if I should mention sort of elephant in the room, US general election, and what that might mean. Because I think I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. It's very interesting, I think, that on the one hand, many people, from my experience of mentioning just the two words, Donald Trump, do cause people to become quite upset. And yet, and often actually, the majority of people who I know are upset by Donald Trump and all he stands for are among the majority of people who may want to move to Portugal from America. And then, as it turns out, he might be the one most likely to open the air travel again if it's possible. I mean, I know he can't do it unilaterally, but he seems to be the one who's more likely to have the COVID barrier removed possibly than Joe Biden. I don't know if this is a safe and helpful diversion at the moment. maybe I should shut up and not mention that. Susan Allen says, is there still resentment toward Jewish people in Portugal? I have to say, Susan, I don't know the answer to that, because I have the cultural age of a 5 or 6 year old. When I go about my business wandering about in Portugal, I don't understand much of what's being said around me. I don't understand the political nuances in the way that I could give you a much better answer in my native United Kingdom. What I know is that I think not, generally speaking, culturally, and I think work is what's it called? Reparation is being done, is happening. I know that Jewish people have, in terms of immigration back from, the diaspora, if you like, are one of the groups that is welcome back into Portugal. So I think there's reparation work for the historical wrongs. If that is in some way dealing with this issue, I'm really not sure. I don't know what you would say to that, Phil.
I have two thoughts about that.
Mm-hmm.
One is that reparation. I heard someone say that they just want the money for the Jews to come from Israel and bring their money and come to Portugal. So that's the real reason for it. It has nothing to do with reparation.
Yeah, that's just a savvy political and economic move.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it was announced when Portugal, was really in debt. So I can see some validity to that. The other about whether there's resentment. I heard a comment when I was at a party, and we were talking about history and Jews and what Portugal did, forcing them to be Christians and to go through inquisitions. And the person said to me, and he was Portuguese, he said to me, "Oh, they brought it on themselves."
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And I think there is still quite a bit of that sentiment underlying in Portugal.
Interesting. Not something I've experienced, I have to say, Phil. But you've been here longer than me, and maybe have a richer social life in all that means, as it would turn out. My limited understanding is that the part of the DNA of Portugal is Jewish.
Oh yeah.
There's not an obvious, like from where I'm from in London and UK. It's kind of obvious, who and where the Jewish community are. That's how England and UK and London is how it's structured. But it seems to me it's much more the DNA of this, how the current Portuguese person is made up, is infused with Jewish genes. throughout the centuries. And I think that's part of the culture. And it just seems to me to be a lot more infused at a biological level than some sort of awkward social situation. But as I say, I'm not the best person to ask about that. Looking at it from a different point of view, Portugal is a calm, laid back, and respectful place from my point of view. And so from that point of view, there's no obvious antagonism. But I guess it depends who you hang out with, right? And how many different sorts of people what you're saying there is you're hoping to escape racism here in the US by moving to Portugal. Excuse me. I from what I can gather, I don't live in the United States. My view of it is possibly hagiographic, or it's given to me by the newsmongers. So obviously it's going to be a very sensational view. But just reading between the lines, it strikes me that Portugal is as a massive generalization, an easier going place with a little less tension of that kind. I don't know. Would you agree with that, Phil?
I do agree with it, but I also think that there is some subtle, I've heard things, again, because my wife is Portuguese, I have access to Portuguese people, and I've heard some things that, well, for example, Brazilians, many Portuguese resent Brazilians being here. They just resent them taking the jobs here and all that kind of stuff. The same sort of things that you hear in the United States and in Canada and
the UK.
In the UK,
yes,
there is, if you scratch beneath the surface, but it's not in your face.
Yeah.
You have to scratch to find it.
Well, that's good. So it's buried, and long may it stay there. A sort of petty resentment among people being people, and I guess you find this all over the world, don't you? And just as a general view, I certainly feel a lot more comfortable here in terms of political tension than I did in my native UK. A friend of mine, I was talking to somebody, actually, a YouTube sort of correspondent earlier on, who asked a really kind of shocking question, British citizens being treated a certain way. Excuse me, and would a black British citizen be treated differently? And I was thinking, well, God, I hope not. British citizen is British citizen. And a friend of mine described it from his personal experience as being the least racist country in Europe, which I think says quite a lot, and I'm happy to hear. But that said, Portugal, like everywhere, is still full of human beings with all their foibles. So that's what you've met, possibly, Phil. There is, you're not going to get away from people if you come to Portugal. You will meet people, and all that comes with people, like these strange, different ideas. And I would like to think a sort of respectful basis for discussing these things as well. I think that's a possibility. But it's difficult making generalizations, isn't it? You there's no doubt you will find out and out racist here, like you would in any country. But I suppose what's the question that's being asked here is, what is the general atmosphere, is what I'm guessing. And I have to say, I do like the general atmosphere. And like other places, around Europe, around the world, we do have what's described as a far right party, Chega. They're keen to point out that they're not racist. And we have had Black Lives Matter protests here, but no, the intensity is nothing like that I can see with my view of the States or from my native UK, and that's pretty much all I can say on it.
Yeah, Chega. What? Oh, the head of Chega, Ventura. Andre Ventura?
That sounds about right, yeah.
So he's the one that told a woman who was visible minority that she should leave. Like, come on. How could this guy even get in to Parliament? He is a racist. I think that if he brings in a lot more people and that party increases its seats in Parliament, I think that will be a sad thing.
Well, I think this is the problem, isn't it, with the blunt tool of democracy as we have it. In the neoliberal governments where things are so polarized, we see the sort of fringe parties on the edges of the sort of, generally speaking, the polar politics, and I think they appear much larger than they are because of the things they say. And the things they say are unpleasant, but they can be so magnified out of all proportion as well. I think it's worth bearing that in mind. And they will attract disenfranchised, hurt, angry, and upset people, which will then sound even louder. And it will be great. It will be a great news day when these voices are loud and expressing themselves. And the anecdote that you shared there, when that gets into the press, on the one hand, quite rightly, to expose such ignorance, but then also an over amplification of a very minority view. I guess we should see it from both of these angles. The ridiculousness and the awfulness of it, but also to put it into some sort of context that this whole country, the sense I get of it, is just not like that. That is very much a minority view. And it doesn't hold sway in the general power play of the democracy here, as far as I can tell.
Yeah.
Thankfully,
I still think Portugal's a very peaceful, very accommodating, nice place to live, and people are very nice to each other.
Yeah.
But, there's still people that have different views, and
still some crazy humans.
Yeah.
Well, history and vocabulary lesson tonight. Obrigado from Charles, who also says, I've read there is some racist sentiment regarding immigrants from the African continent. And I think that, as Phil was saying there, it is extended to Brazilians. And this is this I can see from my past and upbringing in the UK, is that countries with a colonial past have this terrible view and difficulty going on, and I think there is some sort of a problem with that. Again, because of my cultural age in Portugal, I don't fully understand it, but I am aware of it, and I think there is some truth in what you're saying there, Charles. Although I just know that as a thing out there, rather than something I've experienced in my own personal day-to-day experience. Helen asks, so what is the percentage of Jewish DNA in Portugal? I don't know the specifics of that. I don't know. I guess it's one of those questions. And again, I'm uncomfortable because we're dealing in such generalities, aren't we, here? But that it is, it's there, and it's part of Portugal as far as I can see and as far as I'm concerned. But I don't know the percentage, Helen, who joins us from Thailand tonight. But it is something that is the stats are available on the internet. How reliable they are, I don't know. And is probably best a question aimed at some sort of sociologist, and certainly a native Portuguese person who I think who could speak more authoritatively on this than both Phil and I can. And what is behind this resentment you talk about? I'm not sure which resentment I was referring to then, Helen, but I feel the need to get back to the Battle of Ourique. Although I do understand this is important stuff. We will. I mean, we can pick it up and talk about it on another evening. Absolutely no problem with that. Lately, it's become very divisive, violently so. I'm not sure I don't think that's Portugal you're talking about there, Susan. Certainly, as I say, I call them the newsmongers. They deal in bad news and sensationalism. That's the picture I pick up from time to time looking at American TV. But let's face it, there are millions of people in America, all over the world, living very peaceful and quiet lives. And we have to be careful, I think, with the news lens, trying to create such fear and anxiety in people. Although that's not to say I'm not naysaying it. Obviously, these terrible things are happening, but I think it's really important to get it into perspective. Charles Mitchell, I look forward to the day I have no political affiliation. I think you're taking a step in the right direction, Charles, coming to Portugal, to be honest with you. Are they wanting to unite this diversity, and how would they approach this best? Helen, you're taking us into an entire show, I think, about Portuguese politics. What I think I need to do is probably get a Portuguese person on, or two or three, and we'll have a round table and a much deeper look. I'd love to do that, actually. Get some people on who really know what they're talking about in terms of Portuguese politics, the history, and the current culture, and what's bubbling under that us expats may not be aware of. So thank you for that. The way I'm taking that and what I could do with that, Helen. Trump has given hateful people a license to speak out loud. That may well be the case, although I think it would appear both sides are just given to, in their desperation and anxiety, people are getting pretty hateful, aren't they? In America right now, we have a very ugly situation here with BLM and Antifa. Yep, absolutely, Charles. And I'm getting. Hold on a minute. So this is the nub of the question then for Susan. Should we still feel safe moving forward with our move? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Phil and I gave 2 thumbs up earlier on, and again, I think we can do that just for Portugal, and asserting that I would absolutely say yes. We go the double thumbs up for Portugal. Absolutely, Susan. I well done, Phil. It would be naive and foolish to say that there are no racists in Portugal, because, like I said before, people are people with their funny ways and their funny ideas, and also we live in anxious times, which seems to bring out the worst in people. So bear that in mind and plow on with your proposed move. I think you will love Portugal. So yes, do feel safe. Absolutely. It's just, as Phil said, we scratched the surface there of something and revealed and exposed and talked about something, but don't let it put you off, Susan. Helen likes my idea of a political roundtable. I'll have to get to work on that. And Stephen, just finally saying, I am hoping to escape the politics of the USA. Do you know, it's funny that, Stephen, people say that who don't even live in America. And they'll be able to escape that after next week, I think. So should we go back to the Battle of Ourique?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Thanks, Phil, for your patience there.
So now I'm going to present the conventional historical version. So there's a few questions. Was there a Battle of Ourique, and when was it? If this hagiographic description could be just completely fabricated, it may not have existed, the Battle of Ourique. Where was the Battle of Ourique? If it did exist, where was it? Who fought in the Battle of Ourique? Why was there a Battle of Ourique? What's the why behind this? What was the motivation to have this battle?
Okay.
So I'm going to answer all of these questions.
All right. Well, there you go. There's the first one.
Yeah. So was there a Battle of Ourique, and when was it? So there's 4 hagiographic references to the battle. So the Chronica Gothrum, the Vita Sancti Tionite.
Well done.
Chronica Conimbris, and the Chronicon Lamensis.
Let's give Phil a round of applause for addressing each of those.
So they're all Latin, actually. I failed Latin.
Never a guessed.
Well, I didn't fail it, but I didn't do very well. I took 2 years of it, and I was terrible at it. I'm not a linguist. My wife is a linguist. She knows 4 languages. These sources agree there was a battle around 1139, but they have only short descriptions of the battle. So the best that I could come up with is the Chronica Gothrum, so available in Portuguese online at ArcNet. So it was from 1177. So that's actually 1139, because this was before the calendar changed. So this 1177 was in the Julian calendar, and 1139 is in the Gregorian calendar, which is the calendar we
When did
use
that
now.
happen? When did that happen?
That happened in
Roughly.
roughly the 1300s,
Wow. Okay.
if I can remember.
No,
So,
fair enough. Yeah, I didn't know that.
yeah, yeah. So on the 25th of July, so that's a very specific day, and that's because it's the feast of Saint James. So the feast of Saint James occurs on the same day every year, and it's easy to track things via these saints' feast days. So that one is, so if it happened on that, it must have been the 25th of July. In the 11th year of the reign of King Dom. Now, they say King Dom, but he wasn't actually a king in 1139. He was still the count. So it wasn't until after he won this battle that he started calling himself a king. So fought the great battle with the king of the Saracens named Eshmar in the place of called Ourique. Okay, so we've nailed down that, yeah, it happened, and yeah, we got a year. So 1139, the Battle of Ourique occurred. Next slide.
Yeah, this is what I want to know.
So where was the Battle of Ourique? And there was lots of discussion between historians and lots of disagreements, and many couldn't believe that, hey, you're saying that it happened down in the Alentejo. Well, that's like 250 kilometers from Coimbra, which is where the king had his residence. So, what would cause them to go that far? So then some were saying, well, it's actually in another place, the field of Ourique. It might have even been in Lisbon. You've got, the,
Well, I think Campo d'Ourique.
Campo Ourique.
Yeah.
So now the question about 250 kilometers, well, you know what? That's not so far. Because Christians have invaded Muslim territory that far. Alfonso VII of Castile invaded Cordoba and Seville and went even further. So that is possible. Now, where is the exact place? Fortunately, we have an idea. Don Sebastian visited a hill near Castro Verde on January 7th, 1573, and it's documented that he got off his horse, walked on foot, and said, I walk on the cabezas, so heads, of El Rey Don Alfonso Ourique, had a great victory against the Moors. And I read another description of this, and it seems to hint that he actually did physically find heads, and they named the church that they built here São Pedro das Cabeças, so São Pedro of the heads. So there must have been heads that they found, and therefore that's physical evidence that there was a battle. So the Battle of Ourique took place not far from Castro Verde in the Alentejo.
Okay, so we're narrowing in on the Alentejo.
Yeah. So it's in the Alentejo. It's about 250 kilometers. So who fought in the Battle of Ourique? So in the Vitae Sancti Theotoni, the Moors were led by 5 kings, while in the Chronica Gothrum, the Moors were led by 1 king. So he sent his troops so that 1 king apparently sent his troops from his garrisons in Seville, Badajoz, Alves, Évora, Beja against the Portuguese. Oh, I said he was a count. Afonso Henrique at this time was a count. It's probable that the 5 kings were actually the leaders of the garrisons under the overall command of the Almoravid governor of Cordoba. So that's probably who they fought. So they fought the garrisons, so all the people from these towns, and these weren't huge cities at that time. So the garrison might have been like 100 people. And so 5 garrison, and they all would have been carrying their own banners and flags and stuff. So they would have appeared different.
And I was trying to blow that up a little bit there because I was trying to get a sense of the Iberian Peninsula at the time. And that's a very different picture there, isn't it? In 1139,
Yeah.
divided into sort of Christian and Moors, pretty much 50-50 in the landmass there. And you
Yeah.
can see the shape of Portugal just cut out here,
Yeah.
over on the left, obviously. But that you'd have to look twice, wouldn't you? If someone put that map in front of you and it didn't have any names on it, it would completely throw your contemporary terms of reference.
Yeah. Yeah. Portugal was small back then.
Yeah.
So, all of the stuff below about Leiria was Moorish. So there was a border essentially at Leiria or Santarém. Probably, no, Santarém was also Moorish. So, north of Santarém is Christian, south of Santarém is all Moorish. And that's part of a kingdom, or actually more correctly, an empire that was about half the size of Europe.
Wow.
Yeah, so it was big.
And it included Lisbon, right? That's
Yeah.
why so many of the place names in the south of Portugal are like Algarve,
Yeah.
Alentejo. They have an Arabic sound to
Yeah.
them, don't they?
Yeah. And so, and they were Moorish for a few hundred years. Now, the Almoravid actually only were around for about 150 years. It was the Umayyad who were the original conquerors. And then there was the Almohad that came after the Almoravid in 1147. So at the same time as Lisbon was conquered, there was a changeover in the leadership of the Moors. So, this is actually a fairly large area, and that the Almoravid had conquered and were control of. And so that governor of Cordoba was very strong. And he could call in lots of people to fight.
So on to the all important question of why. The big question.
Right. So the conventional story that is being told now in this article in Nova Historia. So Ourique battle, a batalha que nós deu Portugal, who gave birth to Portugal. Ibn Eric, so that was the Moorish name for Alfonso Ourique, advanced through the Alentejo in the face of weak and sparse Muslim forces. That's because most of the Muslim soldiers would have been stationed up near the border with the Christians. So they were all in Santarém, they were in Lisbon, so they were all in the larger cities and places in the north of the Almoravid land. So Alfonso Ourique was able to go through, and he could go through all these towns, and so he went through plundering these villages, and the damage and looting must have been such that the governor of Cordoba would have mobilized an army, and probably using part of the forces that surrounded Toledo and recruiting from garrisons in the Moorish Alentejo towns, and marched against Alfonso Ourique with the objective of stopping his step and ending the expedition, if necessary, through a pitched confrontation.
Wow. And in Netflix, that is going to be an amazing scene, isn't it? I don't know who's going to play these parts, and we want some little cameos in this, don't we? We need to be extras probably in the battle tent, where the leader says, we must now stop his step and end this expedition, if necessary, through a pitched confrontation. For tonight, men, we march. We're going to be in that scene, I think, there, Phil.
Yeah, I'm growing the beard for it.
Me too. Perfect.
So I have an alternate view of this, and it's based on what's happening in Murtala. So the importance of Murtala in the Battle of Ourique. So there's two factors about Murtala that are important. One, it's the navigatable ability of the Guadiana River. So this river flows from Murtala out to the Mediterranean. So that's an important place. Why? Because Murtala has a mine, the São Domingo mine, and Aljustrel mine is just a little bit northwest of Murtala. So the proximity of the metallurgical regions of Aljustrel and São Domingo, known and explored since antiquity. So these mines have been around since before the Romans, actually. And the Romans did exploit these mines, and they mined gold in both of these mines, but also silver and lead and copper. So this was all part of a huge land mass of minerals that was caused by volcanic activity millions of years ago. So there's gold in them there hills.
Okay, yeah, follow the money.
Yeah. So right. Maintaining these trade ties to the Mediterranean, such as Seville, were reinforced throughout the Islamic period, as is attested to the presence of artifacts of Andalusian manufacture and imports from Africa. So that's what the archaeologists are saying. Hey, you've got a river that flows between two mines in Portugal, down to the Mediterranean, where you can then go to Seville.
How exciting.
And what I'm showing here, one is a gold dinar from Seville, that was from 1116. So this was an Almoravid gold coin. And you can see over there in the pink, that's how big the Almoravid Empire was. And they minted hundreds of thousands of coins for this empire. And the coins actually were even used in Europe. They were used in other parts of Africa. So they were very important. And so you can see the two mines there in the picture over on the left. So at Aljustrel and São Domingo. And so what I'm saying is these two mines produced gold that was used by the Almoravid Moors in Seville to mint their coins. Now, that means that there must have been a caravan that went from Aljustrel to Mertila and then loaded with the ore onto ships destined to Seville. And
wow.
that's what the archaeological evidence tells me. And therefore, the Battle of Ourique was actually a gold heist. So Alfonso Ourique, what he did is he intercepted a caravan going from Aljustrel to Mertila and hijacked the gold out of that caravan. Now, I looked at how that might have been possible, and yes, it would have been possible that there were, from Aljustrel, they would load up a caravan, so these would be oxen wagons, so ox pulling the wagons, and they would have loaded them up probably once a year and taken them down to Mertila. And what Alfonso Ourique did is he intercepted them and commandeered them back to the north, up to the north, I believe probably Leiria, and I'll tell you why I think Leiria. So that was the border of Alfonso Ourique's county, and unloaded it there. And this was why there was a Battle of Ourique. It was because they wanted to steal the gold that was coming out of the mines on the Moorish property.
It makes it even more attractive as a film script. Really incredible. Ola boa noite from Doug. He's here. He has something to say about Mertila. I think a lot of Portugal has an Arabic feel about it in many ways. Absolutely, Doug. And as soon as you begin to realize, a Moorish influence, you see it. You see what is that reticular activation? your knowledge encompasses the fact, and then your senses prove it. Best grilled lamb chops in Portugal, and that's probably an original Moorish recipe that you're experiencing there, Doug, in Mertila. So there we go. This is what really happened. Do you want to furnish this a little further then, Phil?
Well, so Afonso Ourique and his men intercepted a cargo of gold from Aljustrel destined to Murtala for shipment to by boat to Seville to be minted into Almoravid coins. So that's the basic, that's my theory. So the population of the towns in the Alentejo, those towns were small. It would not have been worthwhile to travel the great distance and risk being behind enemy lines for a little booty. These towns didn't have a lot of money in them. So why would Afonso Ourique travel 250 kilometers on horse to go from town to town and try and get, money out of these towns? So it just doesn't make sense to me that he would spend that much effort for so little return.
Yeah.
Whereas if he had a spy, and I think he probably did, he had connections to Murtala. He had connections probably to Aljustrel, and he would have been able to predict, when, where this caravan was going, and would have been able to intercept it. And that would have been a lot easier to do than going from town to town, breaking into the houses and stealing money. Now, and most of these towns still had, they have walls. They're not all that easy to get into. And soon as the town folks see, there's a cloud of dust. That cloud of dust is probably a bunch of horses. So let's all get inside.
Pull up the drawbridge. Yes, indeed.
Yeah, pull up the drawbridge. So there's no way that he would have been able to do that easily. It would have been a lot of work, and he wouldn't have got much money. So the other thing too is, after the Almoravid gold was stolen at Ourique, which is, I'm saying that's what probably happened, the Moors responded. So in 1140, like 1 year later, the next summer, Ibn Umar gathered the Moors at Badajoz, Evra, Santarém, and attacked Leiria Castle. They slaughtered the garrison of 250 knights. Like, that's a big deal. And damaged the castle extensively, probably searching for that gold.
Wow.
So
okay.
That's what I think happened.
Amazing. I don't know if you want to do the discussion slide here, if you want to elucidate.
Well, this is a slide of how I think it probably happened. First off, there is a hill that is just outside of that church where I think he would have hidden his men and then jumped on the Moors who were coming across with their wagons towed by oxen. Mm-hmm. And there is a little river there, and there would have been a bridge there, and it would have been an ideal location to ambush the caravan. And, you know, this caravan probably wasn't just one wagon. It would have been several wagons. And I've worked it out about how many wagons would have made sense, and how many Moors they would have needed to guard those wagons, and how many of Alfonso's soldiers he would have needed. And I wrote this story. It's for, you know, 5 to 10-year-olds, like I said, and it's the Battle of Ourique, and it's on Amazon. Just search for Phippe, and you'll see all my stories.
Well, I think the least we can do is put a link to that. I'm searching for it now, Phil. That's amazing. Let's have a look. If I put in Phippe, Amazon, or Ourique, I should get the link to that, shouldn't I?
Yeah, probably. I haven't tried it exactly.
Is it called Mavis and Mum?
Mavis and Mum is, yes, it is.
Why is it called that?
Oh, because I've used Peter for some of the stories, and then I thought, well, I want to have some girls' names. And so it's Peter and Pops for the conquest of Lisbon, but it's Mavis and Mum. Mavis is my mum's name, actually. So, and in Portuguese, it's Maria e Mai.
Perfect. Well, there's the link in the comments, and it's for the tiny sum of just over $4 Canadian. I think with Kindle Unlimited, you can read it for nothing as well. Amazing, Phil. Another fabulous and engaging story. We certainly, Helen agrees. Thanks, guys, for an informative evening from Eric J. Fascinating story from Helen. Douglas talking about that part of Portugal. Even today, there's so much Andalusian influences in like Murtala and Serpa. Place of the cheese, of course, as well. Douglas, thank you for your contributions. Amazing, Phil. And really, I think you and I should star alongside the likes of George Clooney and Brad Pitt in this movie. I don't think it's going to be called the Battle of Ourique. There's probably a better name for it. But I wouldn't be surprised if you or I get a call from, you know, some sort of third assistant or something in Mr. Spielberg's office saying, somebody told me about this YouTube program that you two guys made, the Englishman and the Canadian. Mr. Spielberg would like to talk to you on a conference call about possibly making a movie of this. And of course, I'll be your agent in the negotiations for that, Phil.
Yes, that would be fun.
Well, and on location, where would we go? Would we film it in the Analyses, do you think?
Oh, of course.
Yeah, got to be done.
And in Murtala.
On site in Murtala.
It was great. I had a great visit there, and it inspired me. It made me think of this.
Yeah, I'm sure. And yes, I was going to ask you if you visited the sites, and you did. And yeah, clearly a beautiful telling and elaboration of the basics of the is it hagiography and the conventional wisdom that you've broken into pieces as a new version has risen from the ashes of those pieces in the form of your story. Thanks so much, Phil. Really enjoyed it tonight.
Great. Yeah, I enjoyed telling this story.
Yeah, and that's the three of the Trinity, really, isn't it, so far, of your published works. So we'll welcome you back. I mean, the door is open, basically, for you and your storytelling skill and your wonderful attention to detail and your forensic approach to these things. Is there something in the pipeline that we can anticipate?
Possibly, yes. I have.
Very good.
I've just finished 2 stories, and I'm in the middle of the third one. I'm through the translations with Andrea, So the first one is about Juan the First, who was the first House of Avis king. I have another one where I've got Peter and his brother Trevor, and they're going through the stories of three kings, but in particular is Sancho II and Alfonso III, and they were brothers. And Sancho II was the king, and then Alfonso III replaced him. He usurped him. So that's an interesting story. And then let's see, Trevor and Peter interview Denise the First and Alfonso IV, who was the father. Alfonso IV was the father of Pedro the First, and that's Pedro and Inês. So he is the one who actually ordered Inês to be killed.
Amazing. Okay, well, so come back when that's ready. And for the adventurous among you, read them in Portuguese and you'll get double the value. We're getting a shout out from Marty P. Yeah, Canada, my friendly neighbor to the south of Alaska. Doug saying so many hints of Andalusia in Reguengos. That's the if you may have noticed, I was sipping on a red here. It was the Reguengos made by Carmine. But Doug referring to the Reguengos de Monserrat there. Historically, Portugal is throbbing with history. What a great way of putting it. I just love the discussions today. Thanks, Doug, for that affirmation of our efforts tonight, or certainly Phil's, not mine, really. I've just sat here and enjoyed myself. And Susan saying thanks. And obviously, we haven't put her off coming to Portugal. Seriously, Susan, you got to come here. Keep up with those plans for coming to Portugal and let us know how we can help. Phil, great to be hanging out with you again. Hope to do it again sometime soon. You're very welcome, of course, to join us for our coverage of the US elections, if you so wish. We'll be on from 10 p.m. on Tuesday and Wednesday evening of next week. A few of us, actually, in a bit of a panel discussion.
10 here in Portugal time?
Yes, indeed. In this slot, pretty much. So on Tuesday at 10 p.m. Lisbon time will be. I think
even started.
Well, won't we be looking at some excitation and agitation at Tuesday at 10 o'clock? And we can certainly begin with the punditry at that time.
There might be some exit polls.
Yeah, that's good enough to get excited about, isn't it?
Yeah.
And we can watch Hawaiians having breakfast and then going to vote. And then on Wednesday at 10, in this slot, a week from now, I think we really will have something to talk about. And the likes of Charles and Chris, Frank, Canadian Frank, your fellow countryman, Donna Jacqueline, our expat elder and grandmother of this community, all having their say about the US election, which is, it's going to be a big moment. I mean, love it or loathe it, it's going to be a big moment in human history, certainly as casts its shadow across the rest of the world. And we'll see what happens next week, won't we?
Yeah, I think, every US presidential election is important, but this one I think is even more important.
You think?
Yeah. I think because it has been just such a change.
Yes. Yeah. Well, it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, you're looking at an arc in that story. From the time of the story to our time, 800 years, and there has been such a quickening in human or cultural development, hasn't there? And even in this last 4 years, we have seen so much, haven't we? Certainly in this last year, looking back on this time in 800 years' time will be will be a forensic, an archaeological, and hagiographic job, won't it? It'll be every angle.
Yeah, yeah. This time, I'm glad to live through it. I mean, it really, it is history in the making.
Yeah.
And you know, everything that has happened in the last couple of years, you know, from Brexit to the American election and Trump and the Trump his whole way of doing things, his whole philosophy is a game changer from what Obama was. So it's
yeah, and I would add that is within the compass of European and American culture, and of course, other countries exist. And this too is the Asian century, isn't it? The so-called Asian century that will be looked back upon in history, where, you know, we do well as Europeans and Americans to remember that there are other continents and countries busy at work at the moment, whilst we are so fixated with all our interesting intrigue. There's much going on in the rest of the world, which I think will shape the future in a way that you know, may or may well, let me put it this way, will include us in a very different way. We're not at the forefront of that anymore, I don't think.
Yeah, China now has taken the stage.
Yeah, yeah, and we feel that in Portugal. I'd love to be part of your US election show. I can't wait. Doug, you're very welcome. I hope you know that. Looking forward to your punditry, but coming from your love of well, you, as a UK person with a love of Portugal and obviously an interest in the US, you're very welcome. And David saying, when can I go to Portugal? It's certainly offering itself as a refuge and calm point of view within all of these changes that we're referring to there. Phil, thank you so much. We would do like 10 to 11, but it's been so interesting listening to you and talking with you tonight that we are now 11:30. And I need to be up early in the morning for the Good Morning Portugal show. I hope to have your company then. We have Filomena Pascual on, it's Filomena Friday on Friday, of course, and she'll be here talking to us about Portuguese culture and language. I might ask her about the Battle of Ourique and Martim Muniz to see what she has to say about that. I love people, but I also love jobs, money, and safety, says Charles, which is a random but interesting footnote to end upon. And it may well have been, you know, that both Moors and Christians were saying that 800 years ago, and thereby defining their behavior. Last word to you, Phil.
Well, thanks very much. And I thought this was a very interesting story to tell. And I've got, I think, at least 3 more stories coming up.
Can't wait. Take care and bye for now.
All right. Bye.